The Ranger is perhaps the most misunderstood class in D&D 5th edition. Even the name Ranger gets people confused. So, let's untangle this ugly duckling of a class that has grown up to be one of 5e's finest. I say ugly duckling because at the start of 5th edition's lifecycle, the Ranger was the worst class by far, but all of that changed after Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was released. This book completely overhauls the Ranger class, giving it access to so many new class features. It is impossible to talk about the Ranger in 2023 without acknowledging this book and its monumental impact on the class. So if you haven't touched the Ranger after Tasha's was released, I suggest you watch this video and give it another try. But let's get into the class features. At first level, you can take either Favored Foe or Favored Enemy. The newest feature, Favored Foe, allows you to deal additional damage to an enemy for free. It is that simple. You start by doing 1d4 extra damage and can eventually reach 1d8 extra damage by 14th level. Your Favored Foe can be used a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So that will be 2 times when you start your adventure. Basically, Favored Foe is a free Hunter's Mark. Now, the spell Hunter's Mark has been a Ranger staple since the class was released. However, having so few spell slots at the beginning of 5th edition's lifecycle meant that the Rangers often felt like they had to cast Hunter's Mark and couldn't spend spell slots for any other spell. Favored Foe is the answer to this problem. It's a good class feature with one major weakness. It requires concentration. So, casting a concentration spell or taking damage can cause your Favored Foe to drop. For the most part, this is fine and inconsequential, but I have seen new Ranger players not cast a critical spell or move away from an enemy for fear of their Favored Foe dropping. Favored Foe is not that valuable of a resource. Over the course of an entire battle, you might get 6 extra damage at first level. You never want to waste your Favored Foe, but it dropping is not the end of the world, especially if you're doing something valuable for the entire party. Now, if you're going to be playing a Ranger where you're going to be casting lots of concentration spells, or are going to be in an exploration-heavy campaign, Favored Enemy might be worth considering. The original class feature, Favored Enemy, allows you to select 2 types of creatures and gives you advantage when tracking them and recalling information about those creatures. In campaigns where monster hunting is emphasized or where one specific enemy is fought often, this actually isn't a bad class feature. Additionally, you gain 1 additional language at first level and 2 more by 14th level. With all this being said, Favored Enemy is mostly bad because it's campaign dependent. If your campaign, or let's be real, your dungeon master, isn't suited to this feature, you won't get a lot of use out of it. Most Rangers prefer Favored Foe because of this, but you will find with some spellcasting focused characters, or in campaigns with excellent dungeon masters, you'll get more out of Favored Enemy. You also get either Deft or Natural Explorer at first level, and I won't lie, Deft Explorer is completely superior. There are 3 parts to this feature: Canny, Roving, and Tireless. Canny gives expertise in 1 spell, and that is absolutely brilliant for a Ranger. Canny is amazing for survival campaigns if you take expertise in the survival skill. It also allows for a Ranger to fit the party's stealth role better than most rogues. Just take expertise in stealth and become a true hunter of the forests. But really, Canny is great for patching over any gaps in party composition. If there is one important skill that your party doesn't have covered, Canny allows you to cover it. Plus, 2 extra languages doesn't hurt either. Now all this is pretty good, but at 6th level, Deft Explorer expands its scope. You pick up Roving, which gets you more walking speed, more climbing speed, and more swimming speed. Roving provides great mobility through accessing the vertical dimension of the game. Having a climbing speed is almost as good as having a flying speed in D&D 5th edition. So for that reason, Roving is underrated. And at 10th level, you get the icing on the cake too, Tireless. With it, you're going to get temporary hit points and improved exhaustion recovery. If you need to track some orcs over hundreds of miles and then get into a huge fight, Tireless is here for you. It's just good, and honestly, I wish barbarians had something like this. But I digress, because you get all of this with just 1 first level class feature. So you might be asking, okay, how does Natural Explorer compete? And unfortunately, it doesn't. You choose a favored terrain at first level and then another at level 6 and 10. You can read all that you get from this feature, but what it boils down to is that you're exceptional at moving through your favorite terrain and surviving in the wilderness. However, there are two problems here. The first is if your adventure doesn't take place in your favorite terrain, then you're fresh out of luck. You will never use this class feature. Or two, your dungeon master might not care about exploration. We will talk about this extensively later in the video, but the Ranger is the most DM-dependent class in 5e, or rather, its original form was. So if you don't have a DM supporting this class feature, then you're not going to use it. But on the flip side, if you are in a survival campaign, then Natural Explorer is probably a top 5 first level class feature. You gain expertise on potentially every intelligence and wisdom skill when you relate it to your favorite terrain. You never run out of food, never become lost except if magic is used on you, you track creatures like a bloodhound, and so much more. Even still, in most situations, you're gonna want to go with Deft Explorer. The two times I'd consider going with Natural Explorer is if 1. You're playing a pre-written adventure with one distinct terrain, for instance, Rime of the Frost Maiden and the Arctic. Or 2, if your dungeon master is specifically running a survival campaign. That's it. Otherwise, Deft Explorer is far and away the better option. Next up, the fighting style. You pick this up at 2nd level to augment your ranger. There are two main fighting styles you should look at, archery and druidic warrior. Let's talk about archery first, because many people play rangers at range. Archery's +2 to attack rolls increases your damage and synergizes well with other features and feats. I'm looking at you, sharpshooter. The higher you're to hit, the better you'll be taking out those heavily armored targets. Or better, you'll be sniping the enemy's backline spellcasters with impunity. For a damage-dealing ranged character, archery is a fantastic choice. But also, druidic warrior exists. If you're not playing a ranged character, Druidic Warrior is the correct choice. And I don't say that lightly. You gain access to 2 cantrips from the Druid spell list. The Ranger doesn't normally get cantrips, so this is a huge deal. Especially because one of those cantrips is Guidance. Guidance is the best cantrip you can take as a ranger. Plus 1d4 to anybody's skill check at any time is ridiculously good. As an example, at 2nd level, if you choose Deft Explorer and get expertise in stealth, with a simple +3 to dexterity, you will get a +9 to your roll on average, of course with a maximum of 11. At 2nd level, using Guidance, you can go from +7 to +11, or your survival checks just went from a +4 to a +6 on average. Look at it this way, if you could be between 5% and 20% better at whatever you did for free, would you take that or the ability to make a campfire? Yeah, that's what I thought. Your other cantrip really doesn't matter. I'm partial to things like Druidcraft, Mold Earth, or Produce Flame though. However, you really can't go wrong with Druidic Warrior. Now, some of you might be asking about 2-weapon fighting because the main ranger in the D&D canon, Drist, uses 2 weapons. Well, this is my take on it. The ranger uses its bonus action a lot. Attacking, again, with an offhand weapon is rarer than you would expect. The ranger has 10, yes, count them, 10 spells that they can use as a bonus action. 4 of those spells are 1st level spells. If you're wanting to go with a true dual-wielding ranger, by all means choose this specialty. Other rangers won't get the same bang for their buck though. And I am still partial to all the benefits you're gonna get from Druidic Warrior. But if all this is too confusing and you don't know what to do or you're scared of making the wrong decision, just choose defense. A +1 to AC is always good, and you won't feel bad for choosing this option. Plus, at 4th level, you can change up whichever one of these fighting styles you take. You're not locked into any of these fighting styles. If you take 2-weapon fighting and decide you don't like it, you can easily switch to archery at 4th level. Maybe you take Druidic Warrior and you go, man, this Enter the Dungeon guy's full of shit. Well, at 4th level, you can just take defense instead. Don't stress about this feature. Spellcasting. We might need to stress about this one. We'll actually get back to this because Ranger is one of the most complicated spellcasters in the game, strangely enough. So let's keep it moving and come back to this one once we have a bit more knowledge under our belt. So at 3rd level, in addition to choosing your subclass, the Ranger gets Primal or Primeval Awareness. Primal Awareness gets you free spells. At 3rd level, you get Speak with Animals that you can cast once per long rest for free. The same goes with all the other spells listed on Primal Awareness. For most rangers, you'll only pick up the first 3, but that doesn't diminish the value of the feature. 3 free thematic utility spells is a win in my book. Then you have Primeval Awareness, which is not really worth your time. You can choose a creature type, and for the price of 1 action and 1 spell slot, you can learn if there's a creature of that type within 1 mile of you. This is very bad, because it doesn't reveal the creature's location or number, just that that creature is in fact within 1 mile of you. So if you're tracking fiends, you don't know if you're dealing with 3 or 3,000. You don't even know if they're right behind you. And crazily enough, this feature gets worse in your favorite terrain because the range expands to 6 miles. You can get a random hit 6 miles away from you, and again, you don't know if that creature is 6 miles away or right next to you. Features like Primeval Awareness and Natural Explorer are what handicap the ranger for so long, despite having excellent spells and decent subclasses. So go for Primal Awareness always. There is no reason to ever take Primeval Awareness unless your DM homebrews it. Let's talk about ability scores now. For rangers, you want your primary ability score to be Dexterity. You can do a strength-based ranger if you're wishing to use longswords. Aragorn, the prototypical ranger, is primarily strength-based. But if you're electing to primarily fight at range, use short swords, or fulfill the stealth role in your party, Dexterity is probably your number 1 option. Your second highest ability score would either be Constitution or Wisdom. Constitution is if you're focusing on being a frontline fighter or electing to take spells that don't require a high Wisdom. You take Wisdom if you're wanting to be a spellcaster, the perceptive scout of the group, or the survivalist. Remember that survival checks are Wisdom based. And then whatever score you don't have second should be your third highest. From there, you're going to want to boost your Dexterity or your Wisdom. Wisdom for spellcasting rangers, Dexterity for everyone else. Then if you make it past level 12, you start pumping up Constitution. But ASIs are more than just a time to improve your ability scores. Rangers make fantastic use out of the feats in D&D 5th edition. Consider skipping your first ASI altogether to grab a feat. If you want to, you can jump to this timestamp where we're going to be talking about what the best ranger feats are. But to recap, Dexterity 1, Wisdom or Constitution 2, consider taking feats, they're really good on the ranger. At 5th level, like many martials, you're going to pick up an extra attack. This is a jump in the ranger's power. From here on out, things like Favored Foe or Hunter's Mark that grant extra damage on every attack become more important. You essentially double the damage output of those spells. Something we're going to talk about in the tactics section is how the ranger specializes in hitting high priority targets. But what this concept means for this class feature is that extra attack allows you not to fire at more different targets, but to keep hitting the same target. From here on out, making sure you have your damage multiplier supplied before you start attacking is critical. Don't forget your Favored Foe. At 8th level, you're going to be picking up Landstride, which is just better movement across the battlefield. This feature pairs nicely with spells like Spike Growth, Plant Growth, or Wrath of Nature. You can mire the battlefield around your enemies and attack them with impunity. A lot of players don't realize the power in ignoring difficult terrain. This is an underrated ability. As a ranger, you can work with your spellcasters to absolutely lock down a boss monster that can't fly. Make sure to tell your spellcasters to take spells that create difficult terrain for you. Explain to them that you ignore non-magical difficult terrain and that you want to create it whenever possible. Also, because I know this is going to be a question that is asked in the comments, in 5e, magical difficult terrain and magically created plants are 2 different things. A plant can be created magically, but not be magical. The plants from plant growth are not magical, even though they are magically created. Sentient roots in a magical swamp that are trying to wrap around your legs would be an example of magical plants causing magical difficult terrain. So just keep that in mind. Just because difficult terrain was created by a spell doesn't make that difficult terrain magical. 95% of the time, if it doesn't specifically say magical difficult terrain, it's not considered magical difficult terrain. The last ranger feature we're going to talk about today is the 10th level Nature's Veil and Hide in Plain Sight features. Nature's Veil allows you to become invisible as a bonus action until the start of your next turn, a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. What does that mean for you though? Well, this is a quick burst of invisibility to keep you hidden from a passing guard or to help you vanish in the middle of a dangerous combat. It's a useful feature that you'll probably be using every single session. Now, the original feature, Hide in Plain Sight, is arguably more powerful, but also more situational. You take 1 minute to make camouflage, then add +10 to your next stealth check as you blend into nearby surroundings. The problem is, you cannot do anything while camouflaged in this way. That being said, there are some campaigns where I would absolutely take Hide in Plain Sight over Nature's Veil. Those use cases are, if your group loves surprise attacks, then Hide in Plain Sight is better. You can wait until you're right up on the enemy before getting a surprise round off on them. Another use case is, if infiltration missions are common amongst your group, take Hide in Plain Sight. Here's one of my favorite tricks. If you're trying to sneak into a party, blend into a tree a day ahead of time and let your party mates in through the back door. If you're rocking the right build, you can easily have a +25 to stealth. The final use case though is if you already have a way of gaining invisibility like the Gloomstalker. For some subclasses or character builds, you don't need another way of gaining invisibility, and Hide in Plain Sight fills in a gap for some ranger subclasses. I know it's crazy to say because Nature's Veil is very good, but for some rangers you might just use Hide in Plain Sight more. In most cases though, Nature's Veil is strictly better. It's more versatile and easy to use. Ooh, I hope you're feeling pretty knowledgeable about the ranger at this point, because now we can finally talk about spellcasting. Gotten at 2nd level, for a long time I thought spellcasting did not fit with the ranger class. Many examples of rangers in fiction that I had don't tend to cast spells or make it a large part of their identity. Additionally, the spellcasting of the ranger seemed not to line up with the spellcasting of the druid, which the ranger is based off of. Heck, the druid is a preparation caster, while the ranger must learn all their spells, which is strictly worse. For actual years, I could not make any sense of the class, so I went back to basics and began studying the prototypical ranger, Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings. Then, it hit me. Aragorn's spellcasting in Lord of the Rings is subtle. Some of you might not actually know this, but Aragorn does actually cast spells in the movies and makes reference to what he can do.
I can avoid being seen if I wish, but to disappear entirely, that is a rare gift.
I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like he can just cast Pass Without Trace. Then you see him running with Legolas and being able to keep up with an elf, someone who is physically superior to a human, and you think, well, he might have just been casting Longstrider this entire time. His horsemanship? That could just be Beast Bond. No lie, everything about the ranger spellcasting begins to make sense when you realize one crucial detail. Rangers are the artificers of natural casting. Artificers don't really cast spells, their gadgets produce spell-like effects that are represented in the game as spell slots. I think the exact same thing is true for rangers. Everything that a ranger does is through the subtle manipulation of natural energy. I no longer envision rangers chanting as they cast a spell. Ideally, nobody should know that a ranger has used a spell. Aragorn, Logan Ninefingers from the First Law series, and Raven from the Black Company are all examples of what I think rangers are. Martial fighters who have picked up a few subtle magical tricks due to their years in the wilderness. And side note, before you jump down my throat in the comment section that Logan Ninefingers is a barbarian, he's not. Read the books. Logan is a ranger. The Bloody Nine is a barbarian. If you know, you know. Anyway, picture a ranger from a commoner's perspective. They probably just look like a regular person who knows some neat tricks. I think that's probably how a ranger would describe themselves, a person who has picked up some tricks after being in nature for so long. Why do they know these tricks? Perhaps it's literally them communing with the spirits of nature. It could be the ranger reaching out to nearby ley lines. Or, if your DM is okay with it, maybe there's just no magic at all. You picked up how to talk to animals after being in the woods for so long. Who cares? It's a fantasy world. Everyone's built different. Mechanically though, what do you need to know about the ranger's spellcasting? Well, spellcasting is usually a side dish for the ranger. It is a tacked on part of the class that is designed to primarily add utility. The ranger has some combat focused spells, but you won't get as much out of the class without some utility or healing in your back pocket. In fact, I'd say healing spells are actually a strength for the ranger. You have access to some decent healing within a tanky 1d10 hit die body. You can think of yourself as a great battlefield medic, challenged only by the paladin in that role, and arguably, you can do it better. So overall, I'd gravitate towards healing, utility, and damage buff spells like Zephyr's Strike. Stay away from spells that require saving throws. Spells like Ensnaring Strike are going to be less effective due to your wisdom maybe being your third highest ability score. Your spell slots are, let's face it, limited, so spending one only to have it be a dud sucks. Unless wisdom is your highest ability score, for best results, I'd recommend that if a spell has a save in its rules that you think long and hard about whether or not you want it, because when you level up, you can only replace one spell that you know. Let's talk about the best ranger spells you can pick up. Quick note before we do, I'm covering up to 3rd level spells. Most D&D players don't play past 6th level with their characters. With rangers getting 4th level spells at 13th level, it is likely you're never going to reach those. But here are some spells that you should pick up when you're playing a ranger. 1st level, Cure Wounds. It may not be a lot of healing, but having it in your back pocket can be a great boon to your party, especially if that party doesn't have a lot of healing. Being able to pick up the downed barbarian or the downed cleric is huge in many situations. I'm not going to say it's a necessity, but it's something good to have. Then, Detect Magic. If you don't have a spellcaster with this spell, go ahead and pick it up. Whether you're a group that loves a dungeon crawl or more RP focused, Detect Magic is one of the best utility spells in the game. Make sure you pick it up. Also, consider picking up Goodberry. It gives you fantastic healing and makes survival campaigns a breeze. Lastly, go ahead and look at Zephyr Strike. For the price of a bonus action and a 1st level spell slot, you get advantage on your next attack roll, an extra 1d8 damage, and an extra 30 feet of movement speed while not provoking attacks of opportunity. This is one of the ranger's best spells. I think any ranger benefits from having it. Now, some of you might be asking, well, what about Hunter's Mark? Well, in 2023, Hunter's Mark is obsolete. Yes, Hunter's Mark does have some benefits over Favorite Foe, but you're taking up a valuable spell that you could know. So the choice is between taking Hunter's Mark or taking Hunter's Mark at 70% and an additional spell. From where I stand, in most campaigns, you're going to benefit more by not taking this one staple spell. Trust me, you're probably not going to miss it. Moving on to 2nd level spells now. There is an argument to be made that Healing Spirit is still the best healing spell in the game even after being nerfed. You can be your party's combat healer just by taking this spell. It is that powerful. Moving on, the ranger also has access to Pass Without Trace, which is the best stealth spell in the game. You can be your party's dedicated stealth character by taking this spell. After that, you also have Spike Growth, one of the best area denial spells in the game. How does the ranger have access to all of these great spells? Seriously, once you get access to 2nd level spells, the power of the ranger absolutely takes off. Also, check out the spell Animal Messenger. It's like Sending, but 1 spell level less. Now, Animal Messenger is not instant, but it does get the job done. If you need access to long distance communication, try out Animal Messenger. Finally, 3rd level spells. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Conjure Animals. It is a great spell, objectively for the ranger. I hate it as a player and a DM. Yes, it's good. No, great. I would nuke it from the game if I could. It is my own personal bias, but fuck this spell. Besides, you could be taking a great spell like Lightning Arrow. For a bonus action, you get great single target damage and an AoE splash zone. I think this is a must for any ranger player. Why take flame arrows when this puppy exists? And finally, you have Plant Growth. Plant Growth is a fantastic area denial spell, and it synergizes wonderfully with your Landstride ability. You can also use it in an RP capacity to create a very lush landscape for your beloved NPCs. If you pick up this spell, make sure you have a bag of seeds with you at all times. Throw the seeds out, then cast Plant Growth, allow the seeds to germinate and spread over the entire area. It works like a charm. And so, when you're considering your ranger spell list, just think about all these spells. Additionally, with the exception of Lightning Arrow, pretty much all of these spells are still effective, whether you have 20 wisdom or 10 wisdom. So we are more than 20 minutes into this video, and I have a question to ask you. What is the role of the ranger? We've talked about its features, its spellcasting, and its feel, but just looking at its mechanics, what is a ranger? In my opinion, a ranger is a jack of all trades and a master of none. As hopefully you've seen, a ranger is perfect for plastering over any unfilled holes in your party. Need a healer? The ranger has healing. A stealth character? The ranger can get a +9 to stealth at level 2 and has access to Pass Without Trace at level 5. Perhaps you need a frontline tank. The ranger has a D10 hit die, the defensive fighting style, a litany of defensive spells, and the moxie of a class with nothing to lose. As a ranger, you can be whatever your party needs you to be, and over the course of your campaign, you can evolve to take on any role and do it well. Will you do as much healing as a cleric? No. As much damage as a fighter? Absolutely not. But because you can do both at the drop of a hat, you're valuable. D&D parties with rangers are much more robust than other parties. They don't have an obvious weakness or downfall that can be exploited. At the end of the day, being second best at everything is arguably more valuable than just being the best at one thing. And that is the life of a ranger in 2023. Jack of all trades, master of none, though oftentimes better than a master of one. I've been in 9 campaigns now where, despite the rest of the party being filled with DPS marshals and high-powered spellcasters, it was the ranger that put the party on their back. No matter what problem is in front of you, the ranger has a tool somewhere in its arsenal to solve it. And it does so without dying to a kobold. I'm looking at you, wizard. So how do you roleplay this phenomenal class? Where does your inspiration come from with this character? Well, so many new players see the range in ranger and think archer. This is the archer class. Wrong. Put a park in front of the class and you have its class identity. You are a fantasy park ranger. A park ranger is just a person entrusted with protecting and preserving parks, or preserving nature where the people go. So in a fantasy world where the roads are crawling with goblins, owlbears, and dragons, you need people out there patrolling. As a ranger, you're that patrol. While the druids keep nature in balance with the natural order, the rangers keep nature in balance with civilization. Anything that threatens the trails that people walk or the places where they live is fair game. But what other information can we gather when thinking about these fantasy park rangers? Well, they probably are knowledgeable about the world around them and try to pass that knowledge on to others. Real-world park rangers have a duty to teach others about nature. Your ranger probably has a responsibility to teach people in the local town about the dangers out there in the wilderness. In addition to this, rangers don't work alone. They are a part of a conclave of rangers. These rangers patrol a similar area and have similar talents. My suggestion is to think about your home conclave. What is it like? What makes that conclave unique? If you're playing a Gloomstalker ranger, where would you pick up those talents, and why are there other Gloomstalkers with you in that area? Or are you alone? And if you are alone, how did you come to be that way? What happened to your conclave? Answering these questions can help you easily flesh out your backstory. Lastly, try finding an archetypical ranger that you want to base your character off of. For decades, Aragorn was the prototypical ranger, but in recent years, I think there's a new sheriff in town. Geralt of Rivia from the Witcher series acts much like a ranger. He keeps monsters in line and away from civilization. He's got some light magic, is very knowledgeable, and generally fulfills the requirements of a ranger. Here are a list of other rangers that my viewers helped to come up with. See if any of these characters inspire you when you're playing a ranger. Just whatever you do, get it out of your mind that the ranger is an archer. This class is so much more than that. Now here's the thing with the ranger. As a player, you can do everything right, from character building to roleplay to tactics. But at the end of the day, if one person doesn't do their part, you're fucked. And that's the Dungeon Master. A terrible Dungeon Master will sink the effectiveness of a ranger. Now, don't get me wrong, the DM has a responsibility to all classes, like giving a wizard access to spell scrolls, but the ranger is especially vulnerable. Early on in the life cycle of 5th edition, Dungeon Masters who didn't care about the exploration pillar or the survival elements of D&D nearly killed this class. As we've seen throughout this video, the ranger class is in a better position today. Thanks to Tasha's Cauldron of everything, some great new subclasses and spells, the ranger is more self-sufficient. But I say more self-sufficient, not completely self-sufficient, because there are still some things that a DM must do. Or rather, if the DM does not do these things, the ranger will not reach their full potential. Number 1, if you have a ranger, give them opportunities most sessions to do ranger things. What do I mean by this? I'm talking about foraging for food, guiding the party through the wilderness, making rolls no other party member can make due to their knowledge of the environment. If you leave out the part of the game that the ranger is made for, you're doing them a disservice. So if you have a ranger in the party, don't leave out the exploration pillar from the game. Make sure to keep that in mind while you're preparing for your session. Number 2, help the ranger find their niche. The ranger is really good at covering the holes of any given party. But if you avoid these holes, then there's nothing for the ranger to do. Let me explain. If you have a party with no stealth characters, but because of that there are no stealth rolls, then the ranger misses out on a chance to shine. If the party has no healer, but you weigh the marshals down with healing potions, then the ranger's Cure Wounds or Spirit of Healing won't be nearly as good in the eyes of the party. If the party is full of spellcasters, throw out spell-resistant enemies every few sessions so the ranger can deal some serious damage. Help the ranger find their niche. I see way too often new dungeon masters avoiding the things the party is bad at when they have a ranger in the party. Yo, if you have a jack-of-all-trades character, that's their chance to shine. You throw that responsibility on the ranger and allow them to be the MVP of every single session and be the glue that holds the party together. Yeah, the sorcerer might be dropping fireballs on the goblins every session, but they're going to be thanking the ranger for keeping them alive, for healing them, for tanking the damage, for casting Pass Without Trace to sneak them into the goblin camp. And this kind of leads into my third point. Don't screw the ranger's niche abilities. Sometimes dungeon masters, for pretty much every class, will find a need to screw over the niche abilities of a given class. If every time the ranger uses land stride and they find the difficult terrain is magical, then you're an asshole. Let's say the ranger takes natural explorer for a desert themed campaign. Well, not letting them get expertise on the survival check to search for water in the desert is a huge nerf. That's the whole reason that they missed out on Deft Explorer to get this expertise. Not only do you have to provide the ranger opportunities, but you've got to actually let the ranger use the abilities to the fullest. Some of these abilities are very powerful, but they are also very niche. So give the ranger that space to feel really powerful and exceptional. And number 4, and this is the most important one, give them Tasha's Cauldron of Everything to work with. The developers of the game admitted the class needed the overhaul after years of great subclasses. If you don't let your players use Tasha's, then what are you doing? I say this because I have seen multiple DMs say that Tasha's makes the ranger too strong and they don't let them use the book. Run if your dungeon master says this to you. Just run the other direction. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything does not make the ranger a broken class. It perhaps makes the ranger one of the most balanced classes in the entire game. If you're struggling with the ranger after Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it's a skill issue. I'm sorry, but it's true. But if you're a DM and you keep these 4 things in mind, then your ranger is going to have a fantastic time playing in your campaign, no matter if it's a pre-written adventure or a homebrewed adventure. Let's talk about some exceptional races, though, that you can use for the ranger. The first race we gotta talk about is the Shadarkai Elf. These are elves from the Shadowfell that worship the Raven Queen in D&D lore, but they are perfectly suited towards the ranger class. You get great racial features like Dark Vision, Fey Ancestry, Necrotic Resistance, and Keen Senses, which is going to give you the Perception skill for free, which you're already probably going to want to be taking because Wisdom is going to be high up on your priority list for ability scores. However, the reason why this race is so great for the Ranger is their Blessing of the Raven Queen. As a bonus action, you get to teleport 30 feet a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. And at 3rd level, you get resistance to all damage when you use this trait until the start of your next turn. Rangers love teleporting. It's just something that synergizes so well with the class. If you're a more archery-focused ranger, then you teleport to get out of the front lines. Or as a ranger, you teleport behind enemy lines, drop your favored foe on the spellcaster that keeps on nuking your party, and then you go to town. Or you can even use your teleportation to get into range of a down character to cast Cure Wounds. At some point, the resistance to all damage that this class gives is just gravy on top. But if you don't like the Shadarkai's vibe, you can also try and go for the Astral Elf from Spelljammer. It's pretty much the Shadarkai, but it doesn't get resistance to all damage on the teleport. Instead, you can pick up the Dancing Lights, Light, or Sacred Flame cantrip. I personally recommend taking the Sacred Flame cantrip. You can choose to use Wisdom for this cantrip, and it allows you to target creatures that are trying to hide behind cover. Let's transition to another Spelljammer race, the Thri-Kreen. If you're wanting to run a stealth-focused ranger, this is probably the race for you. The Thri-Kreen's Chameleon Carapace allows you to get advantage on all stealth checks. Plus, its telepathy is perfect for talking to your allies silently on these stealth missions. And even if you're not stealth focused, the secondary arms for the Thri-Kreen can be used for a short sword or a druidic focused while wielding a longbow. It's an incredibly versatile race that works well with what the ranger is trying to do. I highly recommend it, and it's just kind of fun being a bug person. You have so many weird idiosyncrasies as part of this race. But there's another weird race with lots of idiosyncrasies that I'm going to recommend to you, and that is the Kenku. This flightless bird person is perfect if you are a ranger wanting to focus on utility, specifically utility through skill checks. If you have proficiency in a skill, you can give yourself advantage on that skill check a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. You also have the mimicry racial feature, which allows you to copy sounds that you've heard before. That can mean people, but it could also mean animals in the woods. A ranger can make great use out of this ability. Also, with expert duplication, you can recreate any craft work produced by yourself or someone else. So if you're a ranger trying to build a trap for an animal, you can get advantage on a roll if you've made a similar trap before, which you likely have. Or maybe you can convince your DM that the person who taught you how to be a ranger built a trap similar to this. It's whatever you can get away with, you know? But I've been talking a lot about utility rangers, stealth rangers. What about a ranger that just wants to deal damage in combat? Well, then you go with the Goblin race. After Monsters of the Multiverse has been released, Fury of the Small allows you to deal extra damage equal to your proficiency bonus when you hit a creature with an attack or spell. And now you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. When you're playing a ranger, it's all about stacking those damage bonuses. Being a goblin helps you do that, and you're going to be able to use Fury of the Small across your entire adventure to just stack those little bits of damage. Trust me, if you build a goblin ranger with the archery fighting style, the sharpshooter feat, and consistently use your favorite foe, you're going to be consistently outputting a competitive amount of damage. Also, you just get a free bonus action to disengage your hide, so that helps sometimes. But I wouldn't say goblins are natural rangers. I'd save that title for the next race, the Firbolg. Yes, the cow people are the best race for rangers in 2023. They can communicate with animals and plants for free. They can go invisible. They have access to detect magic and disguise self. This is possibly the best race for a ranger. There is a lot of power packed inside a Firbolg. If you want your ranger to just be more rangery, then play a Firbolg. It makes it so easy to fulfill the fantasy. Also, of course, Variant Human is a great race to take. The extra feat doesn't hurt considering that rangers love feats. Speaking of rangers loving feats though, let's talk about some of the best feats that a ranger could take. And first up, I've been name dropping this feat throughout the entirety of the video. It's the sharpshooter feat. It is the #1 feat for rangers looking to increase their damage output. If you want to do more damage, get the sharpshooter feat. If you combine this feat with the archery fighting style, your character will become so consistent. That -5 to hit becomes a -3 instead, which means you're going to be dealing that extra +10 damage way more consistently. But what if you're not damage focused or you already have sharpshooter? Well, another fantastic feat you could take is Ritual Caster. The ranger spell list is filled with ritual spells, so take the Ritual Caster feat and be able to ritual cast to your heart's content. You can even pick up some potent cleric ritual spells with this feat. Ritual casting really helps to stretch out the use of your spells. You no longer have to burn spell slots for the vast majority of your utility spells. This is a great pick, especially if you're really starting to settle into your party's utility caster role. You could also try picking up a feat like Resilient. As a ranger, you have a lot of concentration spells, so picking up proficiency in constitution saves is just good. Again, you're trying to stretch how far your spells go. And this is a better pick for ranger than warcaster because when you're making an attack of opportunity, you want to be using your weapons as a ranger. We don't really care about making attacks of opportunity with our spells. Plus, as someone who might find themselves on the front line, you'll be engaging in many more constitution saves. Now, if you're a ranger who never wants to be on the front line, consider taking Fey Touched. This is going to give you the Misty Step spell plus an additional spell. I've said it before, rangers love teleporting. Fey Touch is going to get you those teleports, plus an additional spell of your choice, and it increases your wisdom score. If your wisdom score is sitting at an odd number and you want to level it up, but you don't have another ability score that you want to use your other point on, just take Fey Touch, increase the wisdom score, and get 2 free spells. It's a huge win. Now, the final feat I'm going to recommend is if you chose to go with the Astral Elf or the Shadar Kai Elf that I recommended for the races. Elven Accuracy can be a brilliant spell for a ranger. Why is it so good though? Well, I'll tell you why. Because you have a way of consistently getting advantage on your attacks. Zephyr Strike is exclusive to the ranger class, and I think that this feat is a small part why. For the small price of a bonus action and a first level spell slot, you get an extra 30 feet of movement, no attacks of opportunity, an additional 1d8 force damage, and of course, advantage on one weapon attack on your turn. It doesn't matter if you're at range or in melee, Zephyr Strike plus Elven Accuracy is going to come through in the clutch. And I'm telling you right now, if you have a DM who gives one free feat at level 1, then you best be choosing an elf for your race and picking up Elven Accuracy at first level. Then at 4th level, you're going to take Sharpshooter, combine it with Zephyr Strike, and be an absolute monster until level 20. It is one of the most fun builds I have ever seen, and I highly recommend it. Speaking of builds though, let's start talking about some multi-classes. The Ranger is a class that loves to multiclass. Because it's a jack of all trades, multiclassing allows you to emphasize one part of the class. Now, one of the premium multiclassing pairings is with the Assassin Rogue and the Gloomstalker Ranger. It's one of the best multiclasses in the entire game. You hit like a truck round 1, and there might not be a round 2 because of you. But pretty much any rogue subclass can aid the Ranger. I personally recommend rogue subclasses like the Phantom, the Scout, the Soul Knife, or the Inquisitive Rogue for an RP heavy campaign. Seriously, being an Inquisitive Rogue with a Ranger, a class that prioritizes wisdom, is a great mix. Also, while I highly recommend a 3-level dip in Rogue to get that subclass, any amount of Rogue is helpful for a Ranger. Expertise and Sneak Attack cannot be overrated. It's just free damage and better skill checks. But also, you know, at 3rd level, the Rogue has access to something called Steady Aim, which gives you advantage on your next attack roll. I wonder if you took a certain feat, how well that would pair together though. But another great class to pair the Ranger with is the Cleric. 1 to 2 levels of Cleric is a powerful dip. It gives your Ranger access to a Cleric subclass and a host of powerful spells. I'm talking about spells like Bless, Healing Word, Shield of Faith, and that's not to mention the Cleric cantrips, which include Guidance, you know how I feel about that, Spare the Dying, and Toll the Dead. Really, you can go ahead and choose any Cleric subclass for these benefits. It really doesn't matter which one. Whatever looks best to you, really. It is truly hard to go wrong with this multiclass. However, if you are a player that favors the hit it till it dies playstyle, then multiclassing the Ranger with the Fighter is another great option. You can improve your damage significantly with the Fighter, because the Fighter is the true archer class. Its subclasses can take your range damage to the next level, and that's not even taking into account its fantastic features like Action Surge and Second Wind. But this is a huge disclaimer about the Fighter going forward, so listen to me carefully. Do not take the Arcane Archer subclass. Not only is it terrible, but it scales off of your intelligence. This is the last subclass you want if you want to multiclass into Fighter as a Ranger. Do not fall into this trap. Arcane Shot is not good. For better archery, go with either the Samurai or the Battlemaster subclass. The Samurai is going to give you more accuracy through advantage and temporary hit points, so it doesn't matter if you prefer melee or ranged combat. The Battlemaster, on the other hand, can make you more accurate, but in reality, it's going to give you more effects on your shots. Either subclass synergizes well with the Sharpshooter and the Elven Accuracy feats. To be honest, once you hit 5th level as a Ranger, feel free to take 3 levels in Fighter with little consequence. You won't fall behind the rest of your party. Oh, and also I should probably mention the Echo Knight is broken. So yeah, you can choose that, and it's busted. You're going to be really strong after that multi-class. I mean, yeah, the Echo Knight is perhaps the best subclass in the game. What do you want me to say? Oh, don't choose it? No, you're going to have a ton of fun. It's going to be great. It's fantastic. Although, if you are a veteran player and you use this multi-class with a new DM, shame on you. Shame on you. You know what you're doing. You're going to break all balancing in this game. Moving on, though, to the final class that you should look at as the Ranger, the Druid. This is a more thematic dip with your Ranger. Not only do you get access to spells, but you get access to Wild Shape if you go 2 levels deep. And I highly recommend taking a 2-level Druid dip for the reason that you get a Druid Circle. My 2 recommendations are Circle of the Moon, works well for fast Wild Shaping in combat and tanking damage. If you find yourself being the frontline tank of your party as a Ranger, consider just dropping 2 levels into Druid and going Circle of the Moon. Circle of the Stars works best with, well, pretty much everything else. Stars is going to increase your damage, your healing, your utility. It's a fantastic subclass. What should you do in combat as a Ranger? The number 1 rule is to have your MBA. No, not a business degree. This is the order of operations for your turn as a Ranger. It goes movement, bonus action, action in that order. It is the checklist that I want everyone as a ranger to go through. Why do I say this? Well, I say movement first because so many times rangers need to remember their spacing. If you are a ranged character, you need to make space between you and the enemies around you on your turn. If you have healing responsibility in your party, you need to be within about 30 to 60 feet of all your party members. That way, if someone goes down, you can pick them back up. Or heck, if you're a melee character, you just have to get in melee range with an enemy. Bonus action is second, so you make sure to remember to apply something like Favored Foe or Zephyr Strike before you attack, or so you remember to use something like Healing Spirit, or maybe a Disengage that you got from a racial ability or a multi-class. One of the biggest problems for rangers when they go into combat is forgetting their bonus action. As a ranger, you should always be using your bonus action every turn in combat. The 2023 Ranger should never have a turn where they are not using a bonus action. So, unless under very specific situations where you are using a bonus action right after your action, always use the bonus action before your action. MBA, movement, bonus action, action. That should be your standard order of operations as a ranger. If you are a new ranger player, I need you to drill that into your mind. Use your bonus action every single turn for something. Now, as a ranger, your role is a little weird. Most of the time, you want to be towards the front line. Even if you're a ranged character and you don't necessarily want to be in melee with a ton of enemies, you still want to be closer to the front line than the back line. This is because, as a ranger, you have a D10 hit die. That means that you have more health than probably a majority of your party members. You have the armor and the health to absorb some hits. So many times I see new rangers being farther away from the front line than the wizard. They keep on backing up because they can attack with their longbow from 150 feet away. Well, yes, you can certainly do that, unless you are the primary healer, and therefore cannot go down in combat. Or there is one enemy left that you are trying to attack at not disadvantage, you should be up on or near the front line. Then once you're there as a ranger, you should start targeting the high priority enemies. What are high priority enemies, you might be asking? Those are enemies that are dealing a lot of damage or who are applying status effects or conditions to the rest of your party. You should not be engaging, for the most part, the grunt level enemies, unless you are being overwhelmed. You are the big game hunter of your D&D party. You hunt the big enemies, so keep that in mind when you're playing. Specifically, I want you to hunt the big game enemies in the back line if possible. And you might be asking, wait, what does that even mean? I'm moving up to the front line, but I'm trying to hit the back line? Yes, if you are a ranged damage dealer, you should be in the front line, targeting the enemies in the back line, not the enemies right next to you. If you are a melee fighter, you should be using your Zephyr Strike to run into the back line, target the enemy, and then run back to the front line. The Ranger is really good at occupying this really weird role, where you are both a tank and a striker at the exact same time. You're probably not dealing the most amount of damage in your party, but you can deal the most important damage in your party. So keep all this in mind when you are in combat as a ranger. And again, do not forget to use your bonus action. If you take one thing away from this section, use your bonus action. Ah yes, you're playing a ranger and somehow you've been stuck as your party's healer. Nobody else is willing to heal or maybe even has the capacity to heal. Will you have to change classes? No. This is how you go about being a primary healer as a ranger. You build your ranger with +2 to their wisdom. Then, at second level, once you get spellcasting, you make sure to take either Cure Wounds or Good Berry. Once you reach third level, you're going to take the one that you didn't take at second level. You don't have a lot of healing, so you're saving it for downed allies at this point. Hang out in the mid-range and rush to any ally that gets down. If you have good berries, pass those to your allies so they can also help with revives. Just pop a berry into the mouth of a downed ally and pick them back up at 1 hit point. You'll have just enough healing to support your party in combat with proper short resting until 5th level. Once 5th level hits, you gain access to the last healing spell you'll ever need. Healing Spirit. This bonus action mass healing spell has the potential for 3 revives. In 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, the only hit point that matters is the last hit point. Therefore, your job as the healer is to keep everyone above 0 hit points. If you're doing that, then you're doing a good job. That also means your job is to keep above 0 hit points. You're the only one that can potentially save your party from a TPK with a healing spirit. So remember in the battle tactics session when I told you to get on the front line? Yeah, you're gonna scrap all that if you are the primary healer in your party. You are staying in the back line and you are staying safe. You have to be the one to pick up your other down party mates if they all go down. Because the moment you go down as a healer, the chances of a TPK for the rest of your party mates goes way up. Now, for more healing than what the Ranger class can provide on its own, you can dip into Cleric or the Druid class. If you dip into Cleric, choose Life Domain. You'll get extra healing on every healing spell and Healing Word for precise ranged heals. As a bonus action, no less. If you dip 2 levels in Druid, you get Circle of the Stars. This gives you the Chalice feature, which, when you heal a creature, allows you to heal another creature for 1d8 plus your Wisdom modifier. Additionally, Druid has Healing Word. This means that as a bonus action, you can cast Healing Word, then heal another creature, and make your attack all in one turn. Again, this requires a 2-level dip, but it is perfect for most Rangers in 5th edition. With either a dip into Cleric or Druid in the build mentioned above, you can single-handedly sustain your party into higher levels of play. The margins will always be tight, but as long as you stay upright, you should be fine. Again, I can't underline this enough. Stay safe, don't enter melee combat, stay behind cover. Healing Spirit has a range of 60 feet, so use all that range to your advantage. So, your party does not have a rogue, or anyone vaguely capable of stealth. Well, it looks like that job has now fallen to you, my friend. So let's talk about how to build a Stealth Ranger. Honestly, it's pretty simple. Build your Stealth Ranger to have a +3 in Dexterity, and make sure to get your Dexterity to 20 as fast as possible. Obviously, you're going to choose Stealth as one of your proficiencies. Then, at 2nd level, take Druidic Warrior and pick up Guidance as one of your cantrips. Before making any stealth check alone, cast Guidance on yourself. At 5th level, take Pass Without Trace as one of your 2nd level spells. Boom, now you have the party's stealth covered. To round out this build, take 1 level of Cleric after 5th level and choose the Trickery domain. Blessing of the Trickster will give you or an ally advantage on stealth checks. If you want the best subclass for stealth, I recommend the Gloomstalker. Well, actually, let's talk about subclasses. The Ranger has so many fantastic subclasses. I truly do think that this is one of the best subclass rosters that any class has. Each subclass is so flavorful and honestly unique from the rest. You can have 3 Rangers with 3 different subclasses and they can feel completely different. I'll have a whole series covering each of these subclasses one by one. So if you want to be notified when those videos are released, consider liking and subscribing. But now we're going to quickly dive into each one of these subclasses and give a general overview of each. And we'll start with what I think is the best Ranger subclass, the Gloomstalker. The Gloomstalker hits hard, stealths well, has great abilities, and is a powerful multiclassing option. This is the peak of the Ranger class. Next up, Beastmaster. This Ranger subclass is built around having an animal companion. It got a much needed revision in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I highly recommend the new version. It is actually usable and gives you an animal friend. The Beastmaster is still a tad weaker than the other Ranger subclasses, but overall I cannot complain. It's a fun subclass. But then you have the Drake Warden, which is the better Beastmaster because you get a dragon. I absolutely adore this subclass because, again, you have a dragon pet. The entire subclass is flavorful, fun, and powerful. My only gripe with this subclass is that you have to wait until epic play to fly on your dragon. But if you can make it till then, this is the perfect Dragon Rider subclass. Next up, the Fey Wanderer, a highly underrated subclass. You get lots of extra damage and a boost to your charisma. The Fey Wanderer is perfect for RP heavy groups. This subclass will have your ranger humming in and outside of combat. The next subclass, the Horizon Walker, is one of my personal favorites. It is a super flavorful subclass with fantastic abilities and spells at its disposal. The Horizon Walker is a blast to play, especially into higher levels. Personally, I've switched when players get the 7th and 11th level abilities with the Horizon Walker. It's not a significant buff or anything, but it does make the subclass more fun to play. Blinking around the battlefield as a Horizon Walker, attacking enemies and getting an extra attack is great fun. DMs out there, I highly recommend you swapping around these two features if your players want it. Next up, the Hunter. This is an underrated damage dealing subclass. In prolonged combats, it hits harder than the Gloomstalker. Plus, the Hunter's AoE abilities allow the Ranger to engage multiple targets better than almost any other martial. This is an underrated gem, and it's what I recommend to all new Ranger players. Simple, yet effective. Next up, we have the Monster Slayer subclass, which is like playing a Witcher in D&D 5th edition. This subclass does exactly what it says on the box. It is dedicated to you fighting monsters. Most of this subclass's abilities revolves around the fighting of these creatures. And honestly, I think the Monster Slayer does that very well. Multiclass a Monster Hunter Ranger with an Alchemist Artificer, and you basically have Geralt of Rivia. However, this subclass doesn't do a lot other than monster hunting, so you have to be playing a very specific type of character if you're going to get the most enjoyment out of this subclass. And finally, we have the Swarm Keeper, and I'll admit, not a favorite of mine. Objectively stronger than most subclasses, but good at lower levels, but it tends to peter out after that. This is probably just my own bias though. It's not a bad subclass, but the Swarm Keeper is not for me. In the wake of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the D&D Ranger has emerged from the shadows, reborn, and truly awe-inspiring. The once overlooked and underestimated class has undergone a remarkable transformation, becoming a beacon of versatility and power. With a focus on being a jack of all trades, the Ranger is now seamlessly blending combat prowess with a myriad of other skills, and really is embodying the spirit of adaptability. The designers have bestowed upon Rangers a trove of fantastic spells, unlocking the true potential of Faerun's Park Rangers. The introduction of powerful subclasses has further elevated the Ranger, offering players a diverse array of playstyles. I mean, just look at the Fey Wanderer compared to the stealthy powerhouse that is the Gloomstalker. Yet, despite these magnificent improvements, the only thing holding the subclass back is the lingering specter of misunderstanding and outdated information that lingers around the Ranger. It's time to let go of past perceptions and embrace the revitalized and extraordinary Ranger, now a force to be reckoned with, both in lore and on tabletop play. Now, if you like this video, consider checking out this one right here. Also, watch out for upcoming Ranger subclass videos. Also, thank you to all my wonderful patrons. Your support really does help the channel. And thank you all for entering the dungeon.